and welcome to the Grace Under Pressure podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Willis, and today I'm joined by two wonderful ladies. How about you introduce yourselves?
Hi, Kristina Barlaan, second degree black belt. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm Erin Herle. I'm a black belt and working on becoming a mental coach.
Awesome. So this is a really wonderful episode. It's a topic that's close and near and dear to my heart, which is mental health and jiu-jitsu, or just mental health advocacy in general. Why don't y'all give me a little bit, Erin, if you want to start, or if Kristina wants to start, just a little bit of your backstory. And, it takes a long time to get a black belt. So, a little bit of your story.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief, which is not my forte. I found jiu-jitsu when I was in the hardcore music scene. So I was already kind of in a male dominated area, but I had never been an athlete before. And I met someone who brought me to the 2008 Pans. And because I live in California and LA, so I'm really spoiled. So it was like, oh, let's just drive an hour and go see one of the biggest tournaments in the sport. And I was like, yeah, whatever this like weird wrestling stuff is. And then I saw like women competing and I was like, that's amazing. So I was like, I'm going to try it, but I had a lot of like social anxiety. And so I was really afraid to step in the gym, but I knew there was one right by my work at the time. So it's like a year later, I finally went in and it was Rômulo Barral. And from there, I was like 3 months in, I was competing and everything. And so for me, it was more of like, wow, I found a thing that I could be creative in, and I can feel that like my weirdness is accepted, because a lot of people in jiu-jitsu are a little bit weird, and the sport itself is weird. It's not a traditional sport. And I struggle with that now in my graduate program for sports psychology, because it's like, they're all like, yeah, so the innings and like the field goals and all this stuff. And to me, it's just sports. So I'm just very combat sport oriented. It's the only sport I've known and actually participated in, besides like PE, classes in high school. So yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to find something that like I could put myself into wholly as a person, as an athlete, all of that.
I started off actually doing Muay Thai before I started doing jiu-jitsu. And so I walked into Cesar Gracie's Academy just by chance, was going to go have dinner at this restaurant next door. My boyfriend at the time was like, oh, there's jiu-jitsu here. And like, I had no idea what that is, or what that was. And I was like, oh, but they have Muay Thai. Like, I'm more interested about that. So I'm like walking in, I'm seeing like Biddy Magalesh like teaching a class. And like, obviously I don't know who he is at the time, but like he's there. And they're like, oh, you're interested in jiu-jitsu? I'm like, no, Muay Thai. Where's the Muay Thai stuff? I'm like, I don't know what you guys are doing. Like, they're like cuddling. I don't know. It was weird. And so, and it took like a year of just doing Muay Thai. I know at some point, like a couple months of doing Muay Thai, someone was like, hey, let me show you some jiu-jitsu stuff. And it was no-gi. I'm like, this is weird. Like, you said that you don't have to be big or strong or athletic to be good at it. You just need technique, but this is like not working. I call BS. I don't think this is my thing. I don't think it's for me. So it took a whole year of nothing but Muay Thai. And then my teammate was like, hey, give jiu-jitsu a try again, but like with the gi on. And I'm like, I was a little bit more open-minded that time. Like, okay, I'll give it a try. And absolutely hooked. I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. But it still took a little time before I actually was able to sign up, because I was still so much into Muay Thai. I had to break up with my boyfriend at the time to start training. Like it was one of those, like, it's either me or jiu-jitsu. I'm like, okay, you can leave. Yeah. You can leave, right? Like I remember literally like the fight we were having was just like, I don't understand why you don't want me to do something that I feel like I could be really good at it, and I feel like it could be really good for me. And he was just like, no, you're not good at it. They're just lying to you. They just want to use you. They just want to touch you. They just want to make a fool out of me. They're just trying to get at you. And like, yeah, you need to leave. You really need to leave. And he's like, who are you leaving me for? Who are you cheating on me with? I'm like, I'm leaving you for jiu-jitsu. There's no person. There's no other person. It's just jiu-jitsu, and you're an asshole. So you need to go.
There you go.
And and then once I met Professor Caio, when he came in, Cesar Gracie brought him in to be the new head instructor, and I saw his style of jiu-jitsu, and I was like, oh wow, like that's the kind of jiu-jitsu I want. That's what I want to be doing. And here we are. I'll be going on to 15 years in October. Yeah, it's crazy ride. Like I literally went from not knowing what it was to now this is like my livelihood. And definitely 15-year-old me would not have guessed that I would be here now on a podcast talking about how I do jiu-jitsu for a living and talking about mental health, which is again super important to me as well.
Oh yeah. But I think you made a good trade, boy, bye, jiu-jitsu's been
Bye.
a good choice. So obviously there's not a whole lot of female black belts out there. There's not a whole lot of females in general in jiu-jitsu. So what's it like? Do y'all compete? Are you able to find good matches? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely, so I've stepped away from the competition area. Especially, I think I was trying to make a comeback, I guess, because I had gone into MMA after receiving my black belt. And so in 2018, I was trying that out. And then I did my first amateur MMA fight, loved it. And then the pandemic happened. So that was really tough. I also, right after that MMA fight, I, met a person who was a big fan of mine and just sent me memes all the time. And now he's my boyfriend. There you go. So of course that has its own struggles. I've for some reason, I just really love long distance relationships. I think I'm too clingy for that to work if we lived in the same town. But so I definitely stepped away from it. But at the time that I was competing at the highest level, I would say like 2012, I was a purple belt, to like 2018, we'll say. So that was like my big run. And my only goal was to be a world champion. I was able to make it happen in Nogi at brown belt. But I was never able to get the actual title. But when you get your black belt, it's like, well, I was a white belt and I wanted to be a black belt world champion. Those were my idols. Those are the people that I wanted to look up to and like follow their footsteps. Because after I trained with Rômulo, I trained with Cobrinha. And then I went to Marcelo Garcia's, and then I went back to Cobrinha. So I got my black belt under Cobrinha, but I was promoted under all three of them at some point. And so those people are the people that I looked up to, like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sacrifice everything so that I can win titles and teach seminars and, just be that badass in magazines. And so you wonder, like, what were the motivations back then? And so I was really hard on myself during that time of competing. And if I lost, which was a lot, I mean, you lose a lot in jiu-jitsu, right? It hurt me a lot, and I didn't have the tools to cope. And so, being a competitor is amazing. It brings things out of you that like you cannot find anywhere else. Competition scares the shit out of me. It always will. It always has. And I like that about it. And so, I stepped away, obviously, and now I'm in grad school for sports psychology. And so that's kind of my focus, is to work with combat sport athletes who were like myself. Maybe they weren't motivated by the right things. They get really nervous. They have pre-existing conditions. Like I have generalized anxiety disorder. So these things were like in my way of being a good competitor. So now I'm focused on helping those people get over those barriers and as trite as it is, like be their best selves. So I just really want to make sure that people do get into competition, they win, they achieve their goals, but they do it in a healthy manner, because I didn't always have the right tools to do it. And I suffered more than most people, I think, because I'm really sensitive. I will cry and fight you at the same time. And a lot of people are like, wait, that's weird. And I'm like, yeah, but it's also natural. It's how I deal with things. You might scream and fight people out of anger. And I'm just like, it's too much information overload. So Yeah. So definitely what drew me to competition or to jiu-jitsu was competition. It kept me completely engaged for so many years until I got to the point where I was like, yeah, this isn't exactly the route that I want, but I've switched gears and now I'm still in it, you know?
Yeah. Competition is like, I mean, that was my everything. I'm slowing down too as well. I am focusing more on teaching. I have a co-head professor position here in Florida, in the Pensacola area of Florida. So like I'm like, it's like they like to call it South Alabama.
This is true.
Yeah, we're very much still in the South. So and yeah, there aren't as many women in jiu-jitsu in this area. Like I definitely like being in California, living there, and yeah, being spoiled. Even I'm not in Southern California, I was in Northern California, but even then, like very, very rich in jiu-jitsu culture. There were like now there's a lot of women, but when I first started, yeah, I was the only woman on the mat. Didn't, you know, I was only able to run into other women who trained. If I was competing against them, you know, I think you and Erin were talking about this right before the interview started. And, you know, and I've met some of the best people through competition, i.e. Erin, right? Like, and I've met, you know, my bestie for life, by fighting her twice, you know, and there were only two of us, you know, in this tournament. And so, and it's very common, especially, like I think in our generation where we kind of came up fighting the same women over and over and over again. Good example for me was like Patty Fontes, like been fighting each other since purple belt all the way through, you know, brown and in black and, you know, and beyond. And now I think like our focuses are changed now. So we don't really run into each other anymore. But, you know, and even now it's like, now whenever I do decide to compete, I'm competing against women who when I was already like brown or black, they were like blue or purple, you know. And so I'm now on the receiving end, like, oh my god, I'm so, you know, like, you know, I've been fighting you since you were a blue belt, and I'm like, oh my god, that's crazy, you know. And to like realize that I'm in that position where I've had that impact is like so bizarre, because I've again, like I had never imagined that for myself at a younger age. You know, same thing with Erin. Like I never really competed in anything. I never competed in any sports. I did dancing since I was 5, all the way up. And then that first time I competed in anything was actually in breakdancing, but it's not the same thing. It's not like a traditional sport. So like actually like competing for like a medal and for first, second, you know, all that, like it wasn't like with actual like referees and like, you know, structure, you know, and not just, you know, punching each other where it's like, oh, unanimous decision. No, like there's an arm raised, and you know, was jiu-jitsu, like really like, and I really, really dived into it because I don't know, like I have always just been competitive in nature. And I think at a young age, I was deterred from it, or not deterred, what's the word? I wasn't really discouraged from competition, like, oh, that's not very ladylike, you know, ladies should be gentle, they should be kind, they should be soft and you know, docile and all these things. And I just was not that. I was always very competitive. It's like there's something wrong with me. And so being in jiu-jitsu and being a woman in jiu-jitsu is so empowering, because I get to compete alongside other women who are just like me, who probably grew up at the same way, like feeling maybe a little like, I don't say outcasted, but like we kind of just felt like we didn't really quite belong. And then now we found each other, and now some of like I never really had close girlfriends, or you know, until jiu-jitsu came along, you know, or martial arts in general. But like, yeah, like now that there's like women's open mats and there's women's only seminars, and like I did not imagine these things would be possible when I was a white belt. And so I think what's really cool is like now we have a podcast where, you know, it's featuring 3 women in the sport. And I don't think any of us would have imagined that when we were white belts.
Oh no, for sure not. I think you pointed out, because I'm from the deep South, you know, Mississippi, where I started out doing Taekwondo and stuff, because like you, I was definitely not, you know, docile, submissive. I was, you want to fight me, bro? You know, I'm going, let's go.
Come at me.
And so I was I was an itty bitty kid. I actually did a Sparta kick off for a boy making fun of my sister on the playground. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So it was definitely not going to be a oh, just sit still, look pretty. But so martial arts has always been a part of my journey, and it has been very helpful for me, and just in life and learning what I can overcome, and also looking back after getting some therapy and realizing what was going on in my crazy brain. I was actually self-medicating and self-helping, and so that's one reason why I'm so passionate about mental health advocacy. What got y'all interested in it? I know you're, Erin, you're in sports psychology, but what got you transitioned to think that way specifically?
Well, I have my own experiences with mental illness, and it was a lot of, and I'm still figuring it out about my childhood and why I was the way I was, but I was just always known as like a difficult child. And I went to a private school when I was in like preschool to third, and they were constantly, I'm aging myself here, but they would constantly page my mother, 911, and she'd call them from her work, and they'd be like, Erin's standing up on the toilet seats. And my mom would be like, was she using the bathroom while she was standing on the seats? No, she was playing hide and go seek. And it's like, okay, bro, obviously I'm just trying to not have my feet seen. Like, I'm just smart. All right. Yeah. So I went to get my ADHD diagnosis, because they told my mom, like, you should definitely go get her checked. And my pediatrician at the time, and I think I was like 5, was like, nah, she doesn't have ADD. She's just smart. And so my parents were like, nice, we got a smart kid. Like, she's weird and she requires so much extra attention, and we don't know why, but at least she's smart. So, I was obviously like
Australian Shepherd.
Australian Shepherd, right? Like, I need a job to do. In fact, in preschool, you're supposed to nap, right? Everyone, you have the period where you're like, cool, everybody sleeps on what, I don't even remember, like mats or something. Cots or something, but there's a sleeping period. And then they're like, they tell my mom, they're like, she won't sleep. And I'm like 5, right? And I have a very active brain. And I think that's also one of the issues with females with ADHD. It goes often undiagnosed because it's internal, rather than like something that you can see. Like boys are always all over the place, and they're like, ha ha, and they're jumping on stuff. And like, I did do some of that, but a lot of my symptoms were like internal, where it was like worrying about rejection, worrying about like having an overactive brain of like just thinking about everything all the time. So, I mean, we sit there and joke about how when you're 3 a.m. trying to sleep and you're thinking about that embarrassing conversation you had, I'm pretty sure I had those going on at like 5. So the solution was, my mom said, give her a paper towel and some Windex and have her clean the tables. So I literally got a job to do, and like it solved it, because they were like, well, if Erin's not going to sleep and she's probably going to disrupt all the other kids trying to sleep, we'll just tell her to be quiet and go clean the tables. So that was my first foray, I guess, into like being different, without even realizing it. But I was always very, very difficult. And I always had, if I could get like an A or a B in my class, it would still say talks too much. Because I would, do my work, and then I would just go turn to my friend and be like, what's going on? Like, I have to say all my thoughts out loud. So I was very disruptive in that way. And then as I got older, especially like puberty and like middle school, high school, I got really, really sensitive to like rejection and trying to be different, but also struggling with making friends. And so that's why I found the hardcore scene. And I was like, I never wanted to be part of a crew. Like I had a group of friends that were all these girls that were from like Girl Scouts when I was in like elementary school. And I probably could have stuck with their group, middle school, high school, everything. But I just was always like, I'm different. Okay. So I would hang out with one group every other day, a different group. And so finding jujitsu, again, like I was weird, and I was like, cool, they accept my weird as long as I'm able to do the technique and whatnot. And it's very creative, but I had a lot of issues with depression, anxiety. So I finally went to a doctor because there was a Craigslist study. I was in college. It was like my first year of jiu-jitsu. And they were like, hey, we'll pay you $500 if you take this drug. You won't know if it's the real drug or the placebo, but you'll just check in with us every week. You'll come in, you'll fill out an assessment about your anxiety. And what's interesting is I got my diagnosis through that diagnosis, because they were like, yep, you fit. And then I remember there being questions about depression, and I didn't want to compromise the ability to be in the study and get the money at the end, because I was like, well, they're obviously looking for anxiety. Like, I'm super depressed too, but let's not tell them. And so that was kind of one of those things of like, I can't tell people that I'm depressed. I can go on my AIM away messages and put really sad lyrics. And then when someone messages me, they're like, hey, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, it's totally fine. Because talking about your emotions and talking about your issues is such a stigma. So obviously in jiu-jitsu, me having to face all of these issues that I had, because that's what jiu-jitsu does. It puts you in very, very difficult positions and situations that you have to overcome literally every time you step on the mat. And some of those battles for me would just be finding a partner. Just being like, oh my God, Alex is going with Stephanie today. I thought I was going to go with Alex. And I would literally just leave and go cry in the bathroom because I thought that everyone hated me. So that's the idea of what I was dealing with in my brain. So it was not by choice that I was like, yes, mental health. It was obviously just my brain doing it for me. But what put me on the side of like, wow, I can be a voice is when my dad died. So 2015, I was living in Jersey and my dad died by suicide, and he shot himself at my home in California. And it was just like, wow, this is really complicated. Like, what, I didn't see this coming. My dad and I didn't have a great relationship at all, but wow, like all that, you see the wake, right, of everything, all the ripples of everything that happens after a suicide that makes people feel guilty and confused and just so sad. And the biggest feeling I had was like this big picture of zooming out of like, wow, suicide fucking sucks. Suicide is horrible. Like it's not just horrible for the person that did it. I mean, to me, it was like, you know, my dad made a choice. He did the choice. He did the thing was completed. And that's why we say, we don't say commit suicide. We say completed. You either attempt or you complete. It's not a crime, right? And so that's the other thing I grappled with, was like, wow, my dad murdered himself. This is murder. And, you know, going into all of these ideas of it. So I was like, well, I'm going to put it out there, and I'm going to put a GoFundMe for the National Alliance on Mental Illness in lieu of like condolences and all that stuff. I was like, let's do something. Let's be action oriented about it. So yes, we raised money for them, but the biggest part was all these people coming out of the woodwork and being like, I suffer from those suicidal ideations, or my mom died by suicide, or, you know, this community kind of came out and was like, yeah, I've been there. So me having my own personal experience along with having the experience of my dad's suicide kind of meant like, wow, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for me, who feels more sound, and because I had the jiu-jitsu outlet and everything, to help other people. Right. And then obviously as it went on, it was like, wow, I can help other people learn to deal with their own anxieties. And of course, I didn't want to go into clinical psychology, but I definitely wanted to help people in the sense of what are you trying to achieve and what are those barriers? So that was it's very specific. And then working with combat sports athletes, it helps me to say, yeah, I've been there. I've done that. I know the difficulties. It's not an organized sport in the sense that you have like people that are like, hey, you need to do this, this, this. The interdisciplinary teams, right? You have to go find that for yourself. You want to get a nutritionist, you got to go find one. If you want to get a strength and conditioning coach, you got to go find one. And so a lot of it is just DIY, and I did it myself as well. So I know the struggles, and the struggles are obviously hard as they are. But when you have any mental illness or just mental health issues at all, that you don't need a diagnosis. Everyone goes through grief, plateaus, burnout, all those, then that's what I can help with. And I think that's a very like doable thing of like, we're going to attack this just as we would attack this position or attack this submission, or, you know, work to get out of bad positions. So it's very easy for me to like look at the trajectory of how the mental health issues kind of brought me to where I'm at. But I definitely could have been a drug user. I could have been like an addict or homeless or whatever. My mom would never ever let that happen, but I have a really good support system, obviously, and I rely on that, and I know how important it is. So, you know, the community of females is really important because there's very isolated experiences that women feel. So then I also built, so I would say that my support system is a bunch of females who are weird and have had their own traumas and struggles. And a lot of them have been diagnosed with mental health issues. And I'm like, wow, we have so much in common. And so I found my people within the community, within a smaller community, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, I also have like my own personal struggles with mental illness as well. I mean, from a young age, I just like something's wrong, you know, and if I can talk about it, you know, I got same thing. It's highly stigmatized, especially in Asian culture. I can't say I'm sad. I can't say, oh, like, you know, I have low energy today, or I feel like, man, I have a hard time getting out of bed. You know, it was just often met with, oh, you're just lazy, or you're not trying hard enough, or you just want attention, you know. And I was, you know, preteen, I'd say I started becoming a little bit more aware of like how bad things were, like preteen and in the teenage years. I remember the first time I attempted suicide, I was 15. I think my first time knowing someone who completed suicide was I was 14. And I just remember that like it's kind of like my whole world came apart, you know, like, oh, this is real, you know. And I feel like there was so much internalized with me that there's like feeling so close to like that feeling, but not knowing what it was until knowing actually someone who did it, and then seeing what it left behind of the people who were very close to him. And like, and I would, like, if I think about it now, I was like, man, I was just like a blip in this person's life, but the impact of that person's presence in my life for how small or insignificant it was at that time was huge. You know, it was like this huge unraveling, and I couldn't really understand at the time, and I'm sure everyone around me really couldn't understand, why is she so sad about this? You know, like she wasn't even that close to him, you know, or, you know, she only knew him for so long. And it was just more of like, oh, wow, this is a real thing. And I just remember like 15 after the first time I attempted, and I remember waking up the next day, I was like, fuck, I woke up. I wasn't supposed to wake up. And going to school like nothing had happened, you know, and hearing the comments from people like, oh man, Kristina, you look like shit. You look crappy, you know, like I was pale, you know, like I took a good amount of pills and it just didn't work. I was sick the whole day. And I just had to pretend like it was just a normal day. I had to pretend like everything was fine. You know, yeah, that experience was like, I tried pills and I wasn't brave enough to cut deep enough into my own wrist. So I remember bandaging my wrist that day too. And people were like, hey, what's up with your wrist? I'm like, oh, nothing, you know, just hiding my wrist. And I remember just like, I remember even writing my goodbye letters as well. And like, oh, well, we're just going to keep this in a journal and we're going to put that away and we're going to bury it and we're not going to talk about it. And I wasn't until I was, I want to say maybe closer to 18, where I actually was able to get like actual help, where my parents were like, oh, wow, we believe you now, you're actually sick, you know. And it took for them to see me have like a full on like mental breakdown in the car on the way to, was supposed to go to like an open house for an art academy that university I wanted to go to. And having this full, you know, breakdown in the car, and they're like, yeah, you need help. And I'm like, I've been trying to fucking tell you guys I've been needing help, and all you've been telling me is that it's just in your head and you just want attention, and you're just lazy or you're spoiled. And this is the first time that I was like, okay, they finally actually believe me, because I'm having this full on meltdown. And that was when I was first started able to, you know, receive medication. And I first started, you know, I started off with a psychologist, and they're like, oh no, she needs to see a psychiatrist. You know, I was telling them like, yeah, there's times when my anxiety gets so bad that I feel like I want to throw myself out of a speeding car. You know, I'd rather do that than feel what I'm feeling. And it took a lot of like realizing that there's a lot of things that bad that had happened to me, but I had blocked them out or had blamed myself for these things for happening. And so it wasn't until I was like maybe in my mid 20s, like 26, I think, is when I first started talking more openly about my mental health. And it actually wasn't even with the purpose of actually talking about mental health. I was talking about my experiences with sexual assault. And that opened up the conversation to mental health. It was like, oh my God, because of these traumatic things, you know, so we have PTSD, we have depression, we have anxiety, we have, you know, suicide ideation all the time. And then on top of that, because I didn't have the tools to cope or understand, like, man, I'm actually in danger, so I'm just going to put myself in these dangerous situations, and so therefore bad things had happened to me, which again was not my fault, but just poorly like managed mental health, which led to other, you know, again, like, which led to sexual assault. And so it took for me to have that, to start talking about it. We had I think during that time was when the Mateo Maldonado case was going out with him, and I can't remember the other person, but like raping a teammate on New Year's Eve. And so that was like a big like thing waking in the community, where it's just like, I need to talk about my experiences with sexual assault. And that started me off in the right direction of like becoming more vocal about also my struggles with mental health. I started wanting to be coached, like doing like the mental training aspect of jiu-jitsu as well. You know, it took for me to have a panic attack at a tournament for me to be like, okay, I need to do this mental training. And that opened up avenues to doing like more self-help stuff. I went and did like the Hoffman process, which was kind of like this, you know, 10-day retreat where you go off and essentially you trace back to like, okay, these patterns and these things that you picked up from your parents, and you know, it's part of your programming, and like trying to like unprogram, like, you know, reprogram ourselves so that we can love ourselves and essentially forgive ourselves and be more compassionate to ourselves and to our parents or to our guardians or whoever it is that raised us, so that we can let go of those patterns and we can adopt our authentic self. And so it was just, I think it took for a lot of these like really I guess life-shaking moments that were happening around me for me to be like, Kristina, you need to wake up and you need to talk, because it's happening to other people. And I think part of me was just like, well, maybe if I start talking, you know, I can't do anything for the 13-year-old version of myself, right? 13-year-old me, she got traumatized, she got hurt, she got harmed. But maybe if I'm talking, maybe that might help 13-year-old somewhere else or 12-year-old somewhere else. You know, maybe it might help them start the conversation with a peer or with a guardian or, you know, like a parent, teacher, coach. You know, like we are in coaching positions now, and so it is really important that like we be that, because I know I didn't have that growing up, and that mentorship is so important. And so it's terrible that we went through the things that we went through. I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, but at least there's all this good stuff. Like, we're not trying to be silver lining it and, you know, be all positive. Like, those things were just really crap. Like they should not have happened, but we also did not have the tools, and the people around us did not have the tools. And so I think this is just our way of like being able to pay forward, making sure that I mean, I'm not going to say that I want to go save lives, but I definitely want to have an impact so that, again, we do have a community where it's just like, you're not alone. And Erin is doing a really good job with Submit the Stigma, and they're doing like their peer support and their peer support like seminars or webinars. And it's crazy, you know, that again, I used to be in one place where I just felt so alone, and now we have a community and we can make a change, we can make a difference. And that's why it's like, it's so important, because I know I am in a position where I am a leadership position. And I never thought I was going to be there. And so I just want to make 13-year-old me proud.
Yeah. I know. I'm not a black belt I got several, probably 2 decades before that happens. Who knows? But I'm grateful I have an opportunity to touch the lives of kids every single day, because I teach high school and middle school. I used to teach 7th and 11th grade, so I got the drama on both ends. But I have had so many kids who they just were feeling bad, and they asked me their story. They asked for my story and they told me theirs. And I thought, oh, it's not professional for me to share my journey. It's not professional. You know, they're going to think I'm weird. Somehow I'm going to get fired because I shared, you know, that I did, you know, attempted and I survived. But when I shared that story with the kids, we had a full on, I think we had like 16 girls just start crying. And then they said, oh my goodness, Miss Willis, I would have never thought that. I thought if anyone can keep it together, it's Miss Willis. And I joked, I said, it's because I'm on meds. That's why I'm always so happy. And so but it just opened up the door to have conversations that they were so afraid to have with people, especially adults. And so I think being, in any kind of leadership position, whether it's in a classroom like myself or on the mats in a classroom in that way, it's just, we have been given such a unique and amazing opportunity to say something and that open a door. It could be, hey, are you all right today? Or it could be, hey, I love your hairstyle. And that might just be enough to just open a door to a conversation. You never know what might happen. And it's always so encouraging to me when you have those conversations, if they leave just a little bit lighter, just a little bit, and that might lead them somewhere. And and I know you have a great organization, Submit the Stigma. I'd love to hear what's, specifically with jiu-jitsu, obviously. So what is that all about? How can people get involved? Those sorts of things.
Yeah. So Submit the Stigma started right after, it was my first competition back after my dad died. It was also my first brown belt competition. So that was huge. Also, it was no gi. So I had a lot of things like going against me because I was such a gi girl, as I say. And then I was training at Marcelo's in New York, and he was like, it's all jujitsu, whether you do gi or no gi. And everybody who did the gi classes did the no gi classes, and it was just normal, right? It was almost like destigmatizing no gi. And so I did the no-gi pans in New York. And I don't really know, I think I had the intention of trying to bring up something of Submit the Stigma because I came up with the hashtag. I didn't intend for it to be a campaign. I intended for it to just be something that I could speak up against, mental health, mental issues that are being looked at as weak, right? And that's always going to be the issue that I have, similar to what Kristina was saying, is like, yeah, we have actual issues, and just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. We aren't just weak or soft or wanting attention. And one of the biggest things is that when people say, oh, she just wants attention, it's like, yeah, she does. She needs help. She doesn't know how to ask for it. And so obviously knowing what it was like to be that person that wanted to just scream out and say, I fucking hate my life, to like, people are going to be like, whoa, dude, whoa, to trying to communicate what I needed to say without it scaring people off. And so it was sort of like, you know what, I'm going to put myself behind this hashtag of Submit the Stigma. Because this is rampant. It's ruining my life. I can't get help. I can't speak about it. I can't find my people unless I can really state what the issue is here. And that's mental illness and mental health and all the stigma against it. And so when I was competing, I was actually up and I was in the final, and I was up by 7-0, and then I got submitted. And of course that's like crushing, because it's like, here I am, like, I'm gonna do the thing, I'm gonna win the gold, and then all of a sudden I get armbarred. It was against an MMA fighter. You can never count them out.
No,
they're always looking for submissions.
So last bit of,
right, they're just like, I don't care what position I'm in. She was in bottom side control and then like armbarred me. So in the moment though, I was crushed. I was like, oh my God, all of these things are coming to a head. I was supposed to win. I was supposed to like not have to lose my dad to suicide. I was, all these things were there. And so I remember I found a piece of paper. I went to the IBJJF and I was like, I need a piece of paper and I need a pen, because they didn't have a marker. So while I was off in the stands, literally crying and just like scribbling out this message on a piece of paper, my podium happened. And I wasn't able to get on the podium to hold the sign because I was busy making the sign. Now, this made me really upset. And I didn't really get too upset till after. Anyone who has competed in New York knows that gym that the city college is not big. No. And whenever you're missing people from a podium, You don't just go, fuck her. You go find her. It's always been that way. Like if you want a full podium, you can walk around and just go find them. I was in the stands scribbling and crying, and I got called out on social media because I didn't show up for the podium. So me crying after losing from being up on points just looked like I was a sore loser, and that I was like, screw her. I'm not going to give her the satisfaction of being on the podium. Not the case at all. But in the meantime, it was like, man, I missed my opportunity. Guess I got to do the absolute. So I did the absolute. I ended up losing to Maisa Bastos, and I ended up getting just default third. So I was like, perfect. So I held the sign, and I held my sign on the third place podium. And from there, it started, other people, I had asked them, just because they supported me. I said, can you hold it up? So it started getting some traction. And then a few months later, I did the Nogi Worlds, and I ended up winning. And that's when I got to hold it. And I had other people who I'd never met say, can I hold it too? And it was like, yep, Kristina held it. And I think Angelica Galval was on the podium and held it as well. And that was big. And it was like whoever touched the sign, like Patty Fontes as well. It's like,
Yeah,
it's like,
I remember
wow,
we all three of us held it together. We all because we were Patty Fontes, Chelsea Bainbridge, or Chelsea Donner, and then me. We're all there.
Yep.
Oh, that
exactly.
was a hard day.
It was heavy, but it was like, wow, other people are literally carrying the weight with me of this sign. And then from there, we worked on getting it into a 501c3 nonprofit. My sister helped there. And for a while, it was just like, I'm just going to run seminars, and I'm going to try to take my network that I have, because I worked for Gracie Mag for a few years, and I've interviewed all the best guys and females. And it was like, wow, I have this network again. Like I said before we started this interview, it was like, I just hit up people, my idols on Facebook, was like, can I do an interview with you? This is like 2010, 2011. So I was like, well, I'm going to do a big old thing at Studio 540 and after Pans. And it was Kristina, Gianni Grippo, Caio Terra, Rômulo Barral, Clark Gracie, and Abraham Marte. And all of them were at this event. There was 100 people. I had Flow Grappling there filming it. Awesome. I had Jiu Jitsu. I had, it was just this big old thing that people were supporting. And I was like, wow, whether they're doing it for me or they're doing it for the actual, mental health, destigmatization process, then that I didn't care. It was amazing. And I did a few more. And today we finally revamped it, because when I first did the whole legal part of it, it was just like, yeah, my mom's the treasurer, my sister's because I didn't expect it to be this big. And so my partner, Valerie Rousseau, who's now Valerie Sasonic, who's just got married, but she is my partner in crime. We don't do crime, but that's just like the way to say it. We do the opposite of crime. And so we have a whole big workshop now that we are teaching every month, called Mental Health Conscious Academy. And so right now it's for the more influential people, like the owners and the coaches. So people who can influence others, and how to be more cognizant of when people are struggling. And just like you said, just being able to say, hey, how are you? And actually care. Approach them in a way that is non-judgmental, that is like, maybe bring them over to a safer place to talk. And then you reach out with empathy. And so sometimes that can look like we do role playing to make sure that you get like really certified, and that we know that you would be able to handle it, of approaching someone as like a peer support situation. And so if someone on the mat is not able to focus, or they leave early, or they stop showing up, there's all these different flags that you can notice out of stress and anxiety or whatever it may be. And it's just, hey, I noticed that you're a little off. I'm concerned about you. Is everything okay? And then that, whether they spill their beans or not, you are offering an open door, as you said, and that makes things lighter. And there's a lot of traditional ideas of jiu-jitsu that, you leave your ego at the door. When you step on the mat, you forget about everything else. And I'm like, that's ideal. that's ideal,
Yeah.
but it's not what's going to happen. You know, someone who is incredibly stressed or is dealing with a loss, maybe they lost their job or their mom or a friend or whatever. I mean, like, it's very hard to just completely ignore it on the
Mhm.
mat. And a lot of times when we're tested on the mat, it comes out, you know, in other ways. And so just having these academies and communities that understand that and understand that people are going to struggle and that it's okay and that you are not alone has been the biggest, I guess, value add that Submit the Stigma has been able to do for the community. And we're also working on, you know, really creating an ambassador program that is peer support, that when you go to a tournament, you're feeling nervous, you can go talk to someone like this, or just within their own academy. But just making a community that values emotion and values the fact that, like, just because you feel a certain way does not mean you're weak or you're not strong, especially in competition. In competition, loss, right? Loss is huge. It's either me or you, buddy. And you know, I could put everything out there and I could still lose because there are things that we cannot control. And so understanding that and understanding that, look, just because you did your best and you didn't win doesn't mean that you're not good enough. And so just these reassuring things that if I can spread these messages and have other people and other coaches meet people where they're at and acknowledge that empathy can really bridge people together without having to fully understand their situation, I think is the biggest thing for Submit the Stigma. And Kristina has really helped out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like the first time I ever did anything with Submit the Stigma was when you had me hold the sign at the Nogi Worlds. That was my first major as a black belt. I remember going in and I had like 2 panic attacks that day. It was terrible. Probably one of my worst performances in Nogi. It's probably one of the main reasons why I don't compete at like Nogi Worlds anymore. And you know, there have been a bunch of other Nogi tournaments that happened after that I had competed that I just should not have had because there's just so much anxiety tied to it. But I just remember like, yeah, like that day, I remember like being on that podium and holding the Submit the Stigma sign. And I had just finished like 20 minutes of just crying my eyes out because I had a panic attack like right before my second match. And I just remember like panic is happening. And like everything's getting loud. I'm like hyper aware of my surroundings. And everything in me was just like, I don't want to be here. I need to leave. I don't want to be here. And I was like, well, I have to get onto this mat. And, you know, I got submitted and I like, you know, shook her hand, you know, went off and just like, like straight beeline to outside to start crying. And it wasn't even that I was sad about losing. It was just like, I was just panicking. I was just so I could not function. And, you know, for me, my body kind of seizes up a little bit. I kind of have to stay in this position. I can't move for a little bit. Once it goes, I just kind of let it pass. And I feel like they still had to have like the finals match for the division because it was just me, Patty, and Chelsea. And I think by the time that was done, like, you know, like, okay, it's time to take, you know, go for the podium, and like they're calling you. I'm like, okay, you know, like I finally had released and, you know, got up there and like holding the sign with like, you know, smiling, you know, like I just, you know, cleaned snot and tears off my eyes.
It's all good.
It's fine. It's fine. You know, it was just terrible, you know, like I think that day I was like 110. I was 110 pounds that day. Like, so like toxic relationship, bad weight cut, just did not want to be there. All of it just terrible. And so it's not that I was in denial about what my mental state was, but I was still kind of a little bit in denial about as much of I already did work ahead of time. Like, again, like I it's not like I don't know, but yeah, I was still kind of like a little bit in denial about like talking about things, even though I was already pretty open. So then when Erin brought up like, hey, I'm thinking about, you know, doing this thing with like the seminar, big thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, count me in, you know, like say less, right? You know, and it was just easy, you know, like, you know, whatever Erin asked me to do, it was just like, okay, like I'm your ride or die, but we don't die.
Yeah.
We just ride.
We're ready for it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're ready. We're ready. And so whatever ideas Erin had, and this is not just amid the stigma. I think literally any idea Erin has, like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm like, okay. You know,
Yes.
when she had the was it the inverted Z, what was your zine called?
Yeah, pulling guard zine.
Pulling guard zine.
I love it.
When she did that, she's like, hey, would you be interested on doing, you know, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. You know?
Oh, you did a whole series of videos on inverted guard.
Yeah.
Yep,
And
it's still on YouTube.
Still on YouTube. And I don't know, it's just like Erin, like once we connected, it was just like we were like that. And again, like it was just nice having a person that just made me feel so seen. And like, yeah, and we're so weird. Oh my God, we're so weird.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, we're so weird.
But you also had me doing things with you because you were like, I'm gonna do this Inspire open mat.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, I'm gonna cover it for Gracie Mag. I'm gonna come to your house. We're gonna spend the weekend together. I'm gonna make pupusas or whatever they were.
We pastels.
Pastel, yeah.
Yeah.
We made like these Brazilian that like with her family. Man. Like I just was part of her family, and then also the same. Like if she comes down to my house, it's the same. And it's like having someone who wants to be action oriented and being like, yes, how can I help? Like, because the ideas that we both have always been for other people. I think it's always been with other people in mind, even when we're like doing weird stuff or like we record where she sings and I sing and she plays her ukulele and we cover songs and we just want to like entertain people. And we once did a video interview at IKEA where we made this guy follow us around to different rooms in IKEA while we answered questions.
I love it.
Yeah, and we talked about real stuff too. We talked about mental health. We talk about, you know, like trauma, and we talk about jiu-jitsu and it's like, man, like it doesn't always have to be like, hey, we're gonna talk about mental health now, you know.
Exactly.
Like, you know, like because you're mentally ill does not mean like, oh my God, like she's a dark cloud all the time. Like she only like that is like the big thing is like, oh, we can't talk about that because she's ill. And like,
she'll
dude,
get upset.
We're alive. And like, like, you know, depression, anxiety, like mental illness has many faces.
Oh gosh,
and
yes.
Yeah. And, you know, like, and especially like, again, we're in leadership positions or we're in positions where we're teaching or we're in front of people. And it's like, oh yeah, you're the last person I would ever thought, you know, you're smiling and you're so personable and you're so charismatic and it's like, yeah, you're like, how do you do it? I'm like, you know, like I'd be so anxious. I'm like, I'm anxious all the time. That's my superpower. You know,
it's like the Hulk. I'm always angry.
Like exactly. The Incredible Hulk. You know, like how do you do that? I'm just always anxious. You know, and it's just like some people just wear it better than others. And just because I have depression doesn't mean I'm sad all the time. It just means I do things and have fun. But yeah, I'm still kind of pushing myself to do it because I know that's the healthy thing to do. But yeah, there's still rocks in my chest, you know. It doesn't mean that, you know, it doesn't mean that you're not smiling ever, you know. Like we have like those like, you know, depressed, and it's like the poster and the kids like this, you know, sad in the corner, and like the you know, and it's like that's not depression. Depression is, you know, feeling detached from everybody and around you, not being able to feel while you're at a party and you have a smile on your face and you're laughing at jokes, you know, or you're having a meal with your family or with people that you care and you don't feel anything sometimes, you know, but you're smiling and you're there and, you know, you got everything. You could have a great job and you can have great friends and great family and great everything. But yeah, depression doesn't care, you know, anxiety doesn't care. And so like Submit the Stigma it's just been great because now, like, again, like I have gotten to meet people like Erin, you know, and we just get to just be real. You know, people like to use jiu-jitsu as therapy, although it should not be a replacement for therapy. It's very therapeutic. It's definitely something that Erin talks about and Valerie talks about a lot, especially during like the peer support webinars is like jujitsu, as helpful as it is, as much as it does give us a community to turn to, it does give us a sense of belonging. It gives us a sense of sometimes routine, gives us something to focus on. It has so many great outlets, but at the end of the day, it is therapeutic and not an actual placement for therapy. You should see a professional if you have access to it, because it's, let's be honest, like health in general is privilege. And so sometimes having access to any kind of healthcare, whether it be mental health care or just regular general healthcare, so it is privileged. It's not easy to get a hold of, but if we can have access to, like, free programs, or sometimes there are like hotlines and things like that, but it should not, jiu-jitsu, as much as I love it, should not be a replacement for actual therapy.
Right.
Correct.
And for sure. And even if you do have means, if you're, graced with having health insurance through a job or your spouse, something like that, I don't know, for me, at least 9 times out of 10, mental health is not covered, so it's not cheap to have an actual good therapist who knows what he or she is doing, as opposed to these AIs that Silicon Valley is kind of trying to push. A robot can't do the job, it's got to be a person. And no, I'm right there with you that jiu-jitsu is wonderful. It allows you to literally work out that stress. And if it's not jiu-jitsu, something about the combat sports, there's just something very therapeutic about punching something in the face. So
I just need to cuddle people. I need some oxytocin. Let me take your back for an hour and a half. Just let me hug you, please.
Yes. Go to sleep.
Go to rage.
Yes, just channel that rage.
Dude, there was an episode of Bob's Burgers, and I don't watch it too often, but I have had people be like, "You're so Tina." And there's this scene where she goes and they all sleep in the same bed, and so she is saying, "My mom sleeps there, my dad sleeps there," and then it just shows her, and she goes, "And this is where I thrash." And it's just her going throughout the entire night while her family is sleeping in the same bed. And there was something about that I was like, if only I had the option to thrash while I was growing up. If only I had that outlet to just go wild, to rage, to thrash. That's just a great word. That's what jiu-jitsu and MMA and kickboxing is for me now. It's like a place for me to thrash, because I feel that everyone needs some sort of outlet. And it's just like my mom has been taking kickboxing longer than I have. Of course, it's not actual kickboxing. It's cardio kickboxing. They just rotate their body and punch the bag. But
it's cathartic.
It's still cathartic, right? It doesn't mean that you have, she's not worried about how to correctly punch. She's just worried about using her body and getting that aggression out, because life is unfair and it's awful sometimes. And of course it's amazing and it's great and there's all these great things and we should always focus on those, but you cannot ignore the fact that either real issues, like you just crashed your car, or you're dealing with, job loss, or, your friend's mad at you. It doesn't matter how small or big or how mental or physical it is, because people get depressed over having an injury and not being able to go back to their sport as well. It's treating those as if they are real, because they are. Those feelings are real. Feelings are very related to cognition and thoughts. How we think about ourselves, how we think about others, it determines how we treat others. It determines how we feel in our world and how competent we feel. How do we feel in charge of our lives? Do we feel connected? Do we matter to those people that matter to us? Those are all very real concerns that people like to ignore. It's like you go up to your coach and you're like, I'm so nervous and I'm so stressed. Like my mom's here and I haven't seen her in 2 years. And they just go, oh, just forget about it. Don't think about it.
Rage.
Just don't think about it. And I'm like, you don't understand. I don't know how to do that. What does that look like? Right. So jiu-jitsu is an application of certain things, but people will be like, oh, just calm down. And I'm like, what does that look like? What does that look like? I honestly do not know what calm down means.
It usually has the opposite effect anyway.
Exactly.
Hey, calm down. I am calm. Oh,
right?
Calm down. Stop it.
Stop telling me to calm down.
I am calm.
it's like, no, you need to give me a little more direction. Like, what is, and so, going into an applied sports psychology program has been amazing, because every paper that I write, even though it is based on theory and models and philosophical assumptions, and we have to incorporate those so that, they can be like, yeah, you do know what you're talking about, but what does it look like? You talk about mental toughness. And it's like, okay, yeah, what is mental toughness? Mental toughness is you overcome obstacles, you do the thing even when it's hard, you focus even though there's distractions. And it's like, these are all great things, but what the fuck does that look like? And mental toughness looks like when you go hit the scale and you thought that you were on weight, but you're not, and you got to go run around the gym or the venue before you can even weigh in. Yeah. Right? Put the sweatsuit on. Like, that's hard. You get broken up with, but you're about to do a tournament, and it's like, what does that look like? Well, it looks like having people say, hey, everything's going to be okay, you've got this, and then saying, hey, let's go warm up, let's get you physically involved, let's go do a roll before your tournament, let's go do this, right? So it's getting into that practical application has been everything, and knowing how to do that and how to, like, what that looks like for other people. And it's not always going to look the same. Kristina and I have different, like, my anxiety attack and her anxiety attack, like, yeah, we both might be crying, but hers is going to be more stiff, whereas I'm going to be angry and just, I don't even know, I just sort of go all over the place. But when she was talking about how she had her panic attack at the No-Gi Worlds, that was similar to me at the 2017 Gi Pans, when I lost the semifinal match and I crumbled. I literally I was crying on the mat. I cried as her hand got raised. I cried after. They literally had to come inside the barrier to give me a hug because I could not move. I was so distraught. It felt like the world was ending. That's what it feels like for me. That nothing else is worthy. I didn't complete my goal. It's just everything. That's big to me. So Kristina went to say, okay, we got to go get you some food. And I wanted a hamburger, and they had no hamburgers. So I'm literally just like, oh my God, worst fucking day ever. Yeah. And so I was like, fine, give me a hot dog. So I had cried for a while. I did not stop crying until I got on that podium, and we were waiting for Heather Raftery, who was also in third place. So it was the first place, the second place, and the third place. And I'm just sitting there and we're waiting. And Kristina does this video of me, because I'm literally sitting on the third place of the podium and I'm eating my hot dog. And I'm swinging my foot, and I'm just like, okay, all right, life is not bad. There's food in my hand. Like, we're going to get through this. And from the outside, it just looks like, wow, she's got great sportsmanship. Look at her. She's living her life. She's in third place and like doesn't have a care in the world. Wow. But really it was like, you didn't see that I cried and wanted to just die because I lost. You didn't see that part of my anxiety attack. It was just, look at her being that champion mindset of not caring, being mentally tough. But what you don't see is that I was just, crumbled on the floor beforehand. Of course, people like to be like, oh, she's so rude, she's sitting on I'm like, bro, you don't have any idea of what I went through just before this. Like, my dreams were crushed, all this. So it's a lot. And I think that it's important for both sides to be seen. I think it's important to see people cry. I think it's important to see what that looks like, because we all have those instances, and you don't need to hide. Like cats who are sick, they are genetically or biologically, like, they go hide because they don't want to be found if they're suffering. And I feel like that's what people do, and it doesn't help anyone else to see that, yes, you will suffer, however, you can still find success. You will be stressed despite the fact that you have good things, or you'll have good things and you'll feel good despite having stress. So those words, those bridge statements are huge. The however, the but, they're the despite's one of my favorite words, because I do things despite not wanting to do them. I do things despite being scared. I do things despite not being fully sure of myself. And I think that's important to mention, because we look at people who do things very well, the champions, and we're like, wow, I'll never be like them because they don't suffer. They don't suffer like me. They don't they don't show vulnerability. They don't show that they're hurting. And then when they do, and you see them win despite, that's probably one of the most powerful things I could ever see.
Yeah,
You've now
like,
given me a new respect for the word despite. I'm sorry. I didn't
yeah.
mean to-
Oh no, you're
Yeah.
good. You're good. It was like, yeah, like everyone shows differently. Everyone kind of like, it's funny because like you're talking about like, yeah, there's some people like want to thrash, some people need to be cuddled, some people need both or something in between. Like one of the main reasons why I stopped doing Muay Thai was because I didn't realize that it was very triggering for me to be hit. Like of course, I loved the release. I got the instant endorphins, punching, kicking, great. Being hit, like I thought I was great, I was fine, but after some time I was like, this is kind of triggering, and I couldn't quite place why. I've never been, like I've never been physically abused before, so I don't know where that came from. But like I remember like one time having, like I had to like leave like a Muay Thai class, or like right in the middle, like I just finished sparring, and I had so much other stuff going on in my mind, and I just remember I didn't want to spar with this person. If I remember correctly, the girl I had to spar was like the girl that was dating this guy that I liked, and
Enemy.
like yeah, and it's just like, oh, like, and like me and that guy tried to date, but it was just the wrong timing, and then like, but like still having feelings, but then now he's dating this girl, and it was just kind of like my thing was just like, I'm not good enough, I'm never gonna be good enough, and this took some time before I actually got to work on that. Like again, I was like closer to like my mid or late 20s before I started working on don't have to be good enough, I just am, right? There's no level of goodness or enoughness, right? It just am, and yeah, having to spar with her, and like, and I think she was aware of like my feelings for the guy, and so I, in my head, she's just like, oh, of course she's going harder on me, because like I'm, and at least that's how I was internalizing it. And like some of like the other girls who saw sparring, like, hey, it's okay, she's been training longer than you, she's more experienced, and I'm like, that's not why I'm crying. Like that has nothing to do with why I'm crying, and just over time I was just like, man, I really don't like feeling small. I don't like feeling like I can't overcome. And jiu-jitsu was great because it was like, oh, even though I'm smaller, I'm not as strong, I'm still able to kind of get through with it. And then all of a sudden, like it clicked, like, why wasn't I doing jiu-jitsu the entire time? As a young child, all I ever wanted to do was wrestle. Like, so Erin's was talks too much, mine was can't keep her hands to herself. So like, and like, okay, and so my therapy, like I have a whole bunch of stuffed animals and pillows, and like that's
oh my gosh, I
my
love
thing
it.
is like every single night, because I'm not a violent person at all. Like if I get angry, I start crying, and like there's times where I do want to thrash, I just want to throw things, and I wish I could scream like, but it gets a point to get to there. But like but yeah, like more than this, like I would, like last night I was kind of having some anxiety, and I'm like calling my boyfriend, and like I don't know what to do with this, like you're like, so, and he's in Maryland, so like we're so far from each other, and like it's like, I don't know what, it's like, can you think of what might have triggered him? Like, I don't know, I just got out of this movie and I'm just really anxious, I don't know what to do. And then like and I'm like getting angry on the phone, like yelling at him, and he didn't do anything, like he's just like, I'm so sorry, like, so like, and then I'm getting angry because he's apologizing for something that he shouldn't have to apologize. And then like towards the end of it, of all of my like rage yelling, of just like, I'm upset, I want this, I'm anxious, I can't do anything about it, I'm like, I just need a hug. And it was this whole roundabout thing. I was like, I just need a hug and I can't get a hug, and now I just want to cry. And it's like this whole thing of like sometimes it just comes in waves too, and I don't think people realize that either. Like I don't think people realize that there's the waves of like, we just say it's like the stages of grief or whatever, or but like there's stages for depression and anxiety too. It's just like acceptance and rage and despite all of that, I woke up and I taught a really good class this morning. Despite the fact that the night before I was just like, I felt like like electricity, like there's like like I said, it's like bees in my brain, and it stings and I can't do anything about it. But I just need a hug. Like, and then having like intrusive thoughts for like, thoughts come in and they're telling you to like hurt yourself, like, oh, you should go and get drunk, or you should go and go out to a strange place by yourself, or you might be putting yourself in danger. Like, these are the kind of thoughts that come into my mind. And it's like, man, like, it's great that we can have a place like jiu-jitsu to turn to. Like, so when we do have feelings like that, like, at least we can be in a place where we can be safe and surrounded by people. And even if you don't talk about it, at least you're doing something for yourself. And again, having a little bit of some of that control, bringing it all in. Yeah.
No, that's one thing. It's so great here. We have at least at our gym here, we have such a great, welcoming atmosphere. We have, on general, for down here, it's a small town where we're at. We got 7 to 10 girls on the mats at any given day.
Nice.
And we are a very small town. Brookhaven, Mississippi is quite small. You may have never heard of it, but it's
collective. No.
I've heard of Laurel, Mississippi from HGTV.
Yeah. Oh yeah. About to say that's
hometown.
Hometown. Yeah. That's actually where my husband's from, is Laurel. And Ben, my husband's name is Ben, and that Ben was his youth minister once upon a time. So yeah,
that's amazing.
We actually invited them to our wedding, but COVID. So, but yeah, so just having that atmosphere, and we've had young girls come in and they're like, I'm just so nervous. And I can think of one girl in particular, when she came on the mat, she was so scared. She started crying. She didn't stay the whole time, and she, kept coming back though. She kept coming back. And now she just always has the biggest smile on her face, loves it. She's not scared of anybody. And so I just love jiu-jitsu because it just can empower somebody who thinks they can't do anything. And I love it. And so it's been such a blessing in my life to, meeting great friends, to having a wonderful community, to, if there's an issue, it is very cathartic for me. And so, and I can tell that it's been a blessing in y'all's lives too, with how long you've been doing it. So I know we've been talking for quite some time. We probably need to wrap this bad boy up.
Yeah.
Anything y'all would like to add before we sign off?
Yeah, I just want to say that Submit the Stigma has a website, submitthestigma.org. We are also on Instagram. We are accepting stories. So every Monday we put out a story, and that goes to just help people understand how mental health relates to jiu-jitsu. A lot of people just say, yeah, it saved my life. But having that personal story of maybe what someone has struggled through and how jiu-jitsu has helped them, it just ignites that feeling of, wow, jiu-jitsu is great, despite all these other things. And so we accept stories. You can email stories at submitthestigma.org. We also have our workshop. You can apply to be an ambassador on the website as well. We have merchandise, patches, shirts. So yeah, if you want to check it out, it's the website and also the Instagram.
Good. And just want to say thank you for having us. This is awesome, just being able to talk. And again, like, Erin's one of my best friends, so like anytime I can involve her when we talk about mental health issues, it's just like she's always the first person I think of. So thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, contact everything, Submit the Stigma. I'm just an ambassador. I'm just someone who just loves to support whatever Erin is supporting. And again, it just so happens that Submit the Stigma and mental health is just something that I'm also very, very passionate about because of its impact in my life and the impact of other people in my life as well. So again, like, I'm not professional. I am just a peer supporter. But I am here to just again, illuminate a little bit. Again, that's all we really can do. If there's a problem, we have to talk about the problem so we can find a solution. We just don't not talk about it. And the only way we can do that is just if we can create safe spaces for us to talk. This podcast is a great example of that, of just like-minded people coming together, sharing experiences and talking openly. At this point, I can't even say that I'm being vulnerable. This is now just my preset. Yep. Like, it feels natural, it feels vulnerable in the beginning because it's like, oh, you're not, because you've been told all your life that you're not supposed to talk about it. But now when you realize, like, when you alleviate of that restriction, when you free yourself, it's no longer vulnerability anymore. I mean, although it is, because you have to be willing to open yourself up to it. But now it's just kind of like we've accepted those darkest spots of ourselves, and we've brought it out to light, and now we're sharing it. And that takes courage, and that takes strength, and that takes practice over time. You don't just do it. You don't just be brave. You don't just have courage. You don't just, it's like say, you don't just stop being depressed. You know, again, like as positive and as optimistic as I can be, and that doesn't mean that I'm no longer depressed. There's no cure. It's just an ongoing process and ongoing growth, and we just do that together. So if you're out there and you need help, just reach out. Reach out to loved ones. If you don't feel comfortable with loved ones, reach out to like anonymous hotlines. Hotlines are available too. You can always talk to someone anonymously, and those resources are always available. It's definitely talked about a lot more than when we were younger. So I think everyone is with better tools now, and that is a great direction for things to go. And I hope that it continues in that direction. We just keep the conversation going.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day and a great training with jiu-jitsu as well. So,
thank you.
Bye.
Good heart.